Hello, I am Ann Turnbull, and I am very happy to have a chance to share some thoughts with you. And my presentation is entitled Enviable Lives for People with Developmental Disabilities Through Group Action Planning. Now, first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. Professionally, I spent most of my career at the University of Kansas, 3.5 decades in the heartland, and before that at the University of North Carolina. I have recently retired, but I want to say that my professional work in the Department of Special Education and the Beach Center on Disability at the University of Kansas was very gratifying. Through my presentation today, I'm going to share a lot about my family, so I want to give you a little family introduction. In addition to being a special education professor and researcher, my husband, Rudd, and I started out with a family of 3 children, our son, Jay, and our daughters, Amy and Kate. I've written a lot about our family and about Jay and his powerful lessons to us, so you may have had a chance to know some about this. Jay experienced multiple disabilities, including an intellectual disability, autism, and a bipolar disorder, but he had a very, what I like to call and will call in this presentation, enviable life. And I want to tell you how that happened and encourage you to be the catalyst for the development of enviable lives for people in your community. Well, Rudd and I both often say that Jay was our best professor. Jay died 6 years ago when he was 41. He was at the top of his adult game. Life was going very well when he had a very sudden and unanticipated heart attack and died. But through those 40 years, Jay was definitely our best professor. But we often said that he would give us the final exam before we'd had the course. So Jay had challenges that required us to keep learning and keep trying to break the glass ceiling so that he could have the life that he really wanted to live. Well, let me go back in time. I want to tell you a story at the outset, and then I'm going to hit the strategies that I think are really important. So the time is the late 1980s, 1990. The place is Lawrence, Kansas, and the players are the Turnbull family and the school district and the adult service agency. At that time, students were all transitioning from high school, from a segregated special education high school program to adult services that were a shelter workshop, a group home, and very segregated recreational and transportation options. Well, supported employment was happening at other places around the country, and Rudd and I were really pushing for supported employment for Jay. Jay said he wanted a job where he could wear a coat and tie, so that was his indication of the kind of job that he wanted. But as systems have such a hard time changing, this system had a hard time changing, and Jay, along with all of his peers in his classroom, transitioned to this adult service system. Well, Rudd and I knew it wasn't right. We knew it wasn't the place that Jay could really have an enviable life. We were members of the board of directors. We were going to work hard to change the program. But what we found is that most of the people in the program were very satisfied with the way the services had always been in these congregate settings, and they weren't interested in changing. Really saw us more as maybe troublemakers or thinking too outside of the box and having that label that is given to parents too often who have visions of being unrealistic. We just weren't accepting the extent of Jay's disability. So Jay transitioned into these programs. He was very unhappy. He, he demonstrated his unhappiness by aggressive behavior toward other people, which was very inappropriate and very unfortunate. But maybe he was fortunate in a sense, and the person that he picked to hit and choke every time he saw him, unbeknown to Jay, was the son of a state legislator. Well, you can imagine how quickly Jay was expelled from the only adult program in our community. And as he was being expelled, and as Rudd and I were envisioning, well, we will start a small agency. We will do supported employment, supported living. Jay will have a life that he wants to live. And when we told the director of the former program, he said, "What are you going to do when you fail?" He knew in his heart of hearts that there was no way that Jay Turnbull could live an inclusive life. Well, I want to tell you that at the time of Jay's death in 2009, he had worked for the University of Kansas for 22 years. He had lived in a home of his own where he had housemates who provided him intensive support on his own terms and in the way that he wanted the support. He learned to use public transportation. He had friends throughout the community. And he had so many places in Lawrence, Kansas that were his Cheers connections. Do you remember the TV program Cheers? The bar where everyone knows your name. Well, Jay had many restaurants and music venues because he loved music, and places all over town where everybody knew his name. So Jay went from being in the depths of depression, spending a lot of time in the timeout booth in the adult agency, of hitting and choking, of being expelled from a segregated program, to having the enviable life of inclusiveness. And when I say enviable life, when one of his younger sisters went to see him at his group home, she came back to our house very upset. And she said, "Mom, you wouldn't want to live there. I wouldn't want to live there. Why is it okay for Jay to live there?" I want you to think about that. I want you to think, put yourself in Kate's position. And she said she wouldn't want to live there. Think of all the people with very significant and multiple disabilities along the lines of Jay that you know, and how many of them have a life that you yourself would want for yourself and your family. You know, I've asked that question all over the United States in conferences where I've been the speaker, and I've asked that question in about 15 to 20 countries around the world. And you know what? Rarely does anyone know more than 2 or 3 people with significant disabilities who have a life that they would like to live. And often the vast majority of people working in the disability field know no one that has a life. Well, this morning I Googled. I just thought, how many documents have been produced about developmental disabilities? Guess how many hits on Google for developmental disabilities? 10 million. I went to Google Scholar and looked at how many research studies have been done on one of 3 terms: mental retardation, intellectual disability, and developmental disability. Guess how many? 3 million studies. So how could 10 million resources and 3 million research studies not have led to more people having the supports that they need to live enviable lives? We need to ask that question, and you and I need to be part of the change. Well, what Rudd and I did, which I want to highly recommend to you, is that we looked at the time that Jay was expelled at the prevalent practice in the field, person-centered planning. And we thought person-centered planning is often considered the key to quality of life. But what we saw is too many plans were being developed that were too rarely implemented. People would come together annually and have this big occasion and put a lot of paper on the wall and write all sorts of things on the paper and develop all these great plans, and then they would go home. And there was no one who had the responsibility for implementation. And the implementation was so huge. It would take so much work to do all the systems change that it felt too overwhelming for everyone. Well, one of the things that I value most about AAIDD, an organization that has been my professional home all of my career, and in which I had the privilege of serving as president a number of years ago. AAIDD is the leader in looking at systems of supports for people with disabilities. What Rudd and I did was to take the concept of systems of support and implement it. And it was with the two of us. We have 6 degrees between us. We both worked at a university. We have enough money to purchase the services that Jay needed. And still, we were not by ourselves able to implement the changes that were needed. So we gathered a group around us, and instead of person-centered planning, we called it group action planning. We still wanted the planning, but we needed it from a group. We needed help, and we needed action. Action every day, every week. And you know, the enviable life that I told you that Jay had took us about 5 to 6 years to create. It wasn't created overnight. And then once it was created, then there were still changes. The job coach would leave, the housemates would leave. So we were constantly in the process of choreographing new supports. But we did this through 5 particular strategies of group action planning that I highly recommend to you. First, inviting support. And we invited support that's not just the professionals or just the family members, but invited the community people who could open the doors to Jay's Cheers connections. And in inviting people, we met monthly. We didn't meet yearly. In our meetings, we tried to have the meeting so you couldn't tell if it was a meeting or a party. That the meetings were fun, and that's the second principle of creating connections, of having snacks, of having laughter, of celebrating people's birthdays, of mourning people's sad occasions in their lives. We created friendships and intentional chosen family where through years of working together, we worked toward envisioning great expectations, the third principle. You know, thinking, no, we weren't being unrealistic. It was very realistic to think that Jay could have a wonderful life. We just had to be creative enough to figure it out. I agree so much with Norman Cousins, who said he worried far less about false hope than he worried about false despair. So in the action group, there was no false despair. And then after the envisioning great expectations, we solved problems. Every meeting was about some barrier that existed, some goal that needed to be met. And as a group of 10 or 12 or 14 people, we would sit around eat our snacks, visit with each other, and come up with creative strategies to overcome the problems. And that was just wonderful. And the final element, celebrating success, making sure that everybody knew how much their help was making a difference in changing the trajectory of Jay's life and ours. Letting people be affirmed in the value of their gifts and talents in this process. In fact, in one of our meetings, we had a different color candle for everyone there. And we lit the candles and we said that everybody brought different gifts and talents. And if it was only Rudd and me, or only Rudd and me and Jay's sisters and Jay, it would just be a little bit of light. But we went around and passed the light, and all of the light from all of the candles, all representing different gifts and talents, were what really made the difference. And that was a celebration that I think everyone there that night, even though that was now about 20 years ago, we all remember it as if it was yesterday. And so in summary, I want to say that to implement the supports paradigm of AAIDD, we need to look at intensifying the depth and breadth of supports for people with very significant disabilities. It's too much work for professionals or families to do alone. We need to create community. And in creating community, remember 5 things. These are 5 things that you can do to implement this process with someone to whom you have strong commitments. Remember, invite success, create connections, envision great expectations, solve problems, and celebrate success. So now I want to challenge you to organize a group for a person that you care about, for at every meeting to focus on a problem and to try to have one task for each person to do between that meeting and the meeting a month later. All of us typically are able to do one thing, but we're not able to do 12 things. But if 12 people all do one thing every month, there are those 12 steps of progress made on a monthly basis. So I encourage you to break the glass ceilings in your community. What Jay was able to accomplish stands as foundation for you to build on, and for you and the people in your community to keep breaking more glass ceilings, going toward a truly enviable life, one that we would all want for ourselves and our family. I wish you the best, and if you would like more detailed information, please feel free to email me at turnbull@ku.edu. Best wishes to you for many enviable lives. Thank you.